Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference and the UBI study area, as well as the navigators who helped us to come to this place for this interesting event, and for the opportunity of sharing topics and reflections on this multifaceted topic. My contribution today will focus on the Bon religious tradition, and it will focus on the following aspects. I'll give you an historical religious overview of Bon, which may be useful for non-experts, aimed also at setting the framework of the topic. I will provide a short discussion of the academic studies in the West. I will present the Bon of diaspora in India and Nepal and its teaching approaches in the West, and I will share a few simple reflections that will provide some insights on the dialectic exchange, for the dialectic exchange that we will have during the roundtable. As is known, on the 3rd of March, Losar was celebrated, the new year of the Tibetan water tiger. However, not everybody knows that populations of Tibetan origin in Dopa of the Karnali, Nepal province, and other Tibetan areas, such as the Kailash mountain or Shigatsen in the San province in central Tibet, for instance, they celebrated New Year on the 2nd of February this year, according to the Shanjun calendar of Bon. And it's the Shanjun rain with Kailash, the Manashwar lake in the middle. That's the place in which the eternal Bon teachings on Yundun Ren were translated and transmitted to various countries in Eastern Asia, including Tibet, where it flourished until it was replaced by Buddhism in the 8th century of Common Age. Daminoshe, the great Shen man, the master and priest, is considered to be the founder of Yundun Bon, or Eternal Bon, and he reformed and systematized the archaic Bon, eliminating bloody sacrifices. According to tradition, Tanta Sherabi Wo became a human in one ring in Tasik, a place which is differently identified in Tajikistan or part of a Persian empire, or with the area of Mount Kailash long before the Common Age and before the victories of Shakya. The three geographies of the master tell the story of the master who escaped to Tongko after stealing the 7 best horses, and that this event was the secondary cause for the first dissemination of Eternal Bon in Tibet, with Kongpo, which is a mountain which is 4,500 meters high, located in southeast in Ninchi County on the northern side of New Santon, is together with Mount Kailash and Tsegilana, again in the Ninching County, which is part of the Tanglan chain, and is one of the 3 sacred mountains of Bon. The tradition wants that Kongpo bears the footprint of the first king of Tibet, Nyotchen Tempen. Moreover, the personal priest of the 9th king of Tibet, that is Nantong Yamayangyan, established the first Yangchen monastery associated to the lineage of these prestigious royal priests. The teachings of Chenrab became the essence of the various forms of Bon, or in any case, one of the most sophisticated of all traditions that had been named Bon until then. The heritage of Tarap and the tradition that he introduced and were systematized by his sons and disciples include spiritual and doctrinal teachings and also diagnostic and healing methods, apotropaic rituals and divination practices based on the old Vintashan Benpun, which is included in many primary sources of cosmological nature. The environment is tripartite and it's made up of 3 different spheres or dimensions: the sky above, the earth in the middle, and the underground world, each dominated by different classes of beings. Divination is closely related to this 3-party division of existence. Mythology informs religious practices in the form of proclamations and rituals, called man in Tibetan, focus on the origin of existence that evoke the pact established in primordial times between human beings and those supernatural forces or entities. The ability to interface and the various ritual techniques to effectively interpret those dimensions were left to hierophants or priests called the Prenchempon. We do not have images of that, but this is a Nashirompa, a shaman from the Nashi ethnic origin, who in their religious culture are deeply influenced by the Bon tradition, characterized by these specific ritual actions aimed at controlling the positive and negative forces or to neutralize dangerous situations called by supernatural beings or non-human beings through the elemental powers controlled by them. There were, for instance, the fire Bonchen. There was one for prosperity, for marriage, for epidemics, for crops, for countering a loss of cattle or kidnappings of children. The rituals for controlling rainfalls and so on and so forth. Also pacifying the souls of murdered people, especially those who were killed with white weapons or knives, who otherwise would cause disgrace. Panchempons for generations have also played the role of protectors of life and physical bodies of Tibetan monarchs. They were called the Kushen, so the body priest, literally, until the 7th century, when for political and hegemonic reasons, the Emperor Sosong Gampon favored Buddhism. A century later, with the successor of Sosong Gampon, the second Dharma Ramcha Suchun Seng, Buddhism became the official religion of the country, and the Pongon were obliged to choose between conversion or exile. From a cosmological perspective, the Bon tradition maintains that sentient beings were created from the beginning through the interaction of the collective entity of the 5 elements, which generated one or more cosmic eggs that hatched as a result of their own power. And their different components originated all the beings of the intermediate and earthly spheres, included in primordial divine couples who generated the human beings that were the first forefathers of Tibet. The Bon texts also maintained that before Buddhism was introduced, the country was ruled through 3 characterizing systems called Chum, Terun, Eben, as described extensively by Professor Choyang Kankanorbu, whom I'm going to quote. Chum were narratives of different types, like stories, legends, epic stories, which represented the secular culture of the country. As in other places, these narratives were left to bards who referred to royal families and relevant events, passing knowledge, religious beliefs, and cosmogonic notions. And so they represented the main means for education and for disseminating culture. In this regard, the stories on the existence of these rituals guaranteed the correct performance of rituals. Teon were symbolical and critical codes used to communicate messages and secret information through words or objects to which special values were assigned. So they were instruments to pass knowledge that could not be disseminated publicly. They were keys to open the portals to the unknown and to the ineffable. For instance, they were very relevant with regard to esoteric instructions, and we may think of a connection of this word with divination in general. In modern Tibetan, the word Tetumi is used to indicate keys. The codes were not limited to the spiritual domain or divination domain. They were used in the courts for different purposes, or to solve problems, to fulfill specific needs, also by common people. Over time, this ancient form of knowledge might have been reduced to its superficial exterior aspect as an enigma, meaning a riddle. And in fact, this is the meaning that the word kept and still has in modern Tibetan. Originally, it was very deep because it was also used by kings and monarchs as part of their names. And the Teo divination, which uses little stones, seems to be one of the oldest, the most ancient, or possible precursor of dice. We see a Bempo master here, and I will discuss this later, who has a divination table in front of himself with these little stones, which should be taken from Kailash mountain for the rituals. And this kind of divination, Deuntrula is its name, is the condensed form of a much more complex type of divination, which is called Chutik in Tibetan, which is made with ropes, 6 ropes, which are weaved or wound for 6 days by virgin girls or pure girls who had no contact with the earthly world. And they're made with the thinnest hairs taken from the belly of sheep. It's a very complex divination system, which includes a base of interpretation of 360 knots, but they use even more. And it covers all aspects of life, not just love, but also astrological, astronomic, medical. It's a divination system which is still used, and this master that you see here is a key player in this type of tradition. The third cultural element was Bön, a knowledge-based system based on 12 main macro areas of science, teachings, and liturgies. According to the Dharma tradition, the revealed text, this was very popular in the time of the first Tibetan Nyeki. After the demise of the Tibetan Empire during the second half of the 9th century, there was a general revival of Buddhism and a gradual development of philosophical and doctrinal theories that over time resulted in the creation of the well-known schools of Tibetan Buddhism. Kongpo, on their part, were not indifferent to these developments, and they committed themselves in the systematization of their beliefs and in the codification of scriptures. In this respect, the need for the Burma to structure their religious knowledge in a classification in 9 vehicles that we know pretty well as a taxonomic system with the Nyingma apparently only became popular in the 11th century, that is late as compared to the development of the same religious tradition at a time characterized by a prevalence of the Buddhist world and the resulting search for an identity-based legitimation by Benpom themselves. One may maintain that the 9 vehicles of Burn, divided into the 4 vehicles of the cause and 5 vehicles of the fruit, represent, in essence, the entire range of Tibetan religious practices, because they include divination systems, pacification and control on local deities and on the world of non-human beings, submission or annihilation of opponents through apotropaic ceremonies, post-mortem liturgies to help the deceased, moral discipline for lay people, strict ascetic monastic rules, psycho-bio-spiritual transformations linked to tantras, and the metaphysics of Dzogchen. According to David Llewellyn-Slengroth, 1920-2016, in the taxonomy of Kongpo, the 4 vehicles of cause, Burma honestly tried to relate the old ways of magic rituals with the new ways of morality and meditation. That is, the 5 vehicles of the fruit, plus that they were more correlated to Buddha Dharma. This process of adaptation and systematization could not take place without the interactions or inspirations coming from the doctrinal currents or principles that were gradually forming. And albeit it seems hard that such process took place unilaterally, the late Tibetan Buddhists took a very negative position against Burma, which contributed to the development of a narrative image of the latter that reduced it to a sort of black sect that was outside of Orthodoxism, that had misinterpreted the majority of Buddhist principles. This despite the fact that under the Great Fifth, the Dalai Lama Nawan Losang Gyatso, 1617-1682, Burma was officially recognized as a Tibetan religion. This narrative image affected the attitude of a Western scholarship towards tradition, which for many years was scorned, subjected to suspicion and marginalized. With regard to history of research on Bern, the first translation of a Bern text, although a partial one, was the one published in 1881 by linguist and Tibetan expert Franz Hartung Schifter, 1879, entitled Über das Pompo Supra, das Feiten nada unter 1000. So Bempo Sutra, which was not a sutra, the 100,000 White Naga, it's a very important text in the system based on the 4 vehicles, which is very important also for medical diagnostics. In 1220, Bonn bibliography, which was created and compiled by Dan Martin, she said 1220, but I read it 2020. So it has been updated on May 27th. It lists 2,003 titles, including articles and monographies published by Tibetan and Western scholars, proving that Bern studies have become a true separate discipline, as is also proven by, for instance, the international conference that was held at the School of Oriental and African Studies of the University of London on the 9th of September 2011, entitled Chanjun and Early Tibet, an international conference celebrating 60 years of Tibetan studies at SOAS, 50 years of Bempo studies in the West, and the founding of the London Shinchen Chum for Tibetan studies. And it's also proven by numerous panels devoted to this topic that take place during the seminars of the International Association for Tibetan Studies, an association that was formally created in 1979 at the Oxford University, which was renamed Yakford by some Tibetan expert with a sense of humor. The next one will take place this year in July at the Charles University of Prague. And it was SOAS, indeed, that prompted more studies, thanks to Professor Snellgrove that I mentioned before, who was the first one to allow Bempo to express itself with his own voice, whereas previously the voices of Tibetan orthodoxy dictated the pace of Western scholars. David Snellgrove invited several authoritative spiritual leaders and scholars in London, and we see him here with the hat. And then you see 2 lamas, Jinzin, and I can't remember the other one, the 2 lamas, and the master Zimdin Zindanla, who was born in Cannes in 1926. There he is. We will hear Professor Giacomella Orofino in a short while, and she will explain the contribution of this person. Here we see him together with the 14th Dalai Lama in 1978. When speaking of Tibetan traditions, he often refers to the 5 Tibetan traditions, including Bon. Now, if you want, I have a publication that was made to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the construction of the monastery of Merlin that I will describe in a while. And we also find a letter by the Count Chipa of Kacha and another one by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who are sponsoring and supporting this event and the activities of this monastery or monastic complex. Anyway, Dan Martin's comment to the introduction of the above-mentioned site is still truthful. The true and painful irony is that most of Bon practice, history, and literature is still unknown to the world at large. Breathtakingly so. However, the diaspora Bon flourished in its spiritual activities. In 1959, a limited, researched group of monks in Lama Benpo crossed the Himalaya and reached India to establish a permanent seat designed to become a refugee center as well as a Bon religious center. In mid-1960s, Lombon Tinzinanda, in cooperation with the Catholic Relief Service, identified a suitable place and organized the purchase of a beautiful land on a mountain in northern India at the Dolangi village in Himachal Pradesh. A new Menri was appointed. It was named New Menri, which means the mountain of medicine, in memory of Tashim Mergampa, originally formed in 1405 in Tongten, in the province of Ta, by Master Yamen Chirapyan Sen, 1356, 1416. And they worship Benpo as the second Buddha. Tashim Mergampa became the most important monastery throughout the Tibetan territory. Known for the rigorous respect of monastic discipline, it set the standards for all monastic settlements of Bon in the following eras. Rinchen Yansen, the main disciple, and others wrote many works, and they tried but failed to establish a center for debate in Menrin. Through to the foundation of the Dun Limgun Pa Debate Center in 1936, the monks studied the sutra according to the technique of debate at the nearby Sakya monastery Du Yu Tseng Tseng Gonpo. And they had access to the title of Sakya Geshe. Whereas for Gampen Dong Chen, they trained in Chen. The original core of Menrin, which included, which was formed of precarious structures, this has become a complex of colorful buildings, all in classical Tibetan style. The project was designed and built under the supervision of the 33rd Menri Abbot Lungchen Tempenina, who died in 2017. The center includes several temples at the moment. the meeting hall. There you see it. A library. This is an overview of the center. There is a school of dialectics that trains monks for the title of geisha. And then rooms for the monks, a convent for nuns. In front of this complex, there is a hill, and the nunnery is outside of this complex. An interesting note is that they established a curriculum for nuns as well to obtain the title of geisha. And we already have the first graduates among the nuns. They're, doing the test for their PhD at the moment. We have a hostel, an ambulatory, a school of Tibetan medicine, a farm, some rooms for guests. This blue building in the bottom right-hand corner, they're outside of the monastic complex. In 1987, an additional Bempo monastic complex that was set up by Master Tenzin Tenip Panda in Nepal on the hill facing the Stupa of Phayango, which draws inspiration from the monastic complex built in the 14th century in central Tibet by Master Shen Niman Mansen, who was born in 1360. This slide shows the activities of Bempo across the world, and it shows that some of the main players and current representatives of the Bön tradition, some of whom are very active in the West. This is a recent online celebration event for the commemoration of the 666th anniversary of Nyemin Yansen. In this regard, I'd like to briefly touch upon the Tawa Damde Rinpoche, who is the 34th Merli abbot, and then Polari Manin Rinpoche. The 34th abbot was appointed on the 1st of January 2018 as a result of a process that included prayers, rituals to the deities and protectors of the Bön. And so it's a process that leads to election by selection. It's not determined by a system of reincarnation. And it's a task that is assigned for life. The 34th abbot was born in November 1972 in Tibet. When he was 17, he became a monk in the Malinando monastery, which is very important also for the previous abbot. And then when he was 18, he entered the dialectic school, which is the school where Bön geisha are trained. He then received the title, and then he got to Malin in India, where he received his PhD in 2012. He served the 33rd Genzing in Marine for many years, and he filled many important roles in a monastery, different types of roles. In February 2018, all Bempos worldwide gathered to celebrate his appointment in a ceremony for his appointment that took place in September 2018. I prepared the video clip, but I don't think we have time to watch it. How long do you have?
Già finito.
So the 34th, Ginseng is also a member of the advisory council of the Tibetan Monastery Services, a new universal consortium providing different support services and education services for monasteries and so on and so forth, prayers on demand and others. The Rinpoche was born in 1962 in Tsarka in Dolponepa, a remote village in the prestigious family of Yantun. As historically documented during the time of pre-imperial Tibetan monarchy, a priest of the Yantun village was considered to be a requirement in royal settings as a counselor and protector of king. Nyingyi Bodhinya started his career when he was very young in Nepal and participated in a number of 3-month retreats focusing on the fundamental philosophical texts belonging to the various curricular levels of the monastic tradition of Bern. Then in 1979, he went to a new monastery in India to start metaphysical studies and other important areas of the Bern philosophy. And so he received his philosophy master in 1989. During this period of time, he also refined his skills in the painting Bern tradition. In 1992, he was appointed head teacher of the dialectic school, where he heads all PhD courses for monks and nuns. He's a famous scholar, an excellent master of philosophy. He was and still is an expert and a source of information for many Western scholars who study the religious tradition of Bern. He's also recognized by international Tibetan scholars as a very important expert in the archaic Tibetan language and in the ancient divination systems. He is still teaching in various countries such as China, the Czech Republic, the UK, France, the United States, Russia, and so on. He's currently writing an encyclopedic dictionary of thousands of pages of ancient Bern terms, for which he used thousands of sources. In the West, the most important centers are in France, such as this one, Shenten Dargelin, set up by Jujun Trendin Rinpoche in 2001. This is the study room. And also in the United States. The first is in Charlottesville in Virginia, and it's called Linshan International. It was established in 1992 by Tenzin Nyingma Rinpoche, who was born in India in 1961. He's a master who can easily and successfully relate with the Western audience through an emphatic and modern language. The second one is in California, the Johnson Institute. Here you can see the library. And it was set up and directed by Champur Rinpoche from Andonawa. There are also many smaller centers with fewer practitioners in various European countries, in South America, in Mexico, and so on. The teachings that they deliver concern aspects of both levels of Tantra, Shern, transfer of consciousness, Tum, Yidan practice, liturgies for the soul, or Yamung for prosperity, and the Dzogchen perfecting school, which is the highest of the 9 vehicles in Bern as well. They use the social media for general information on seminars and retreats. As strengthened, especially in the last couple of years when, because of COVID, people could not move. To conclude, I think we can affirm that every means is successfully used by the school to disseminate the teaching of Tantra Sarat, and in the current scenario of the dissemination of Dharma and its ethical principles, then has taken on more and more weight and importance. Thank you very much for your attention.